So here we go. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start enrolling patients with the first surgery that I perform as a surgeon, but I don't operate on 10 patients all on the same day. The patients will get operated on in a spaced out way, and I may not be willing to wait until every last patient has died before I write my paper up, because I may have some interesting results that I want to share before that point. And in the case of some clinical trials in which you're going to measure survival in, say, 5 years, and you're accumulating the patients over a 5-year interval, you don't want to wait 10 years before you publish it. Because if you started the trial on year 1 and you enrolled the patients for the next 5 years, you're going to have to wait at least 10 years before you can analyze it. So Kaplan Meier is a way of getting around that. And also, as you'll see, it's a way of dealing with incomplete information in a very clever manner. So here's our clinical trial. We've got 10 patients. And the first interval that we're interested in looking at is the interval from 0 to 1 month. And the reason we're going to look at the interval from 0 to 1 month is 2 patients happen to die at the end of that interval. So during that interval from 0 to 1 month, no patients were censored. We'll talk about censoring later. And we did talk about it in class. But at the end of the interval, there were 10 patients left, and there were 2 deaths. Okay? So at the very beginning, of course, Kaplan Meier curve shows 100% survival. At the end, 2 patients died. So the curve is going to come down a certain amount. And one patient died from surgical complications, from surgery. And one died from complications of the pancreatic cancer. It does kill very quickly. Okay. And as a result, the curve will drop down. Now, how much will the curve drop down? Well, at this point that we're talking about, there are 10 patients at risk and 2 died. So 2 out of 10 patients died. And the percent surviving is 8 out of 10. So the percent surviving is 80%. All right, good. So we've got 80%, and now we follow that out. The next interval will be from 1 month to 4 months. Now, it turns out in that interval, nobody died. The reason we pick 1 month to 4 months is because there was 1 death at the end of that interval, but several other things happened. Now, at this point, at the 2-month mark, 1 patient showed up to clinic at the 2-month part, but never came to clinic again. And we don't know what happened to them. We made phone calls and so on. So that patient is lost to follow-up. Lost to follow-up. All right? We can't say whether or not that patient lived or died after 2 months. Our information is incomplete. However, we do know that that patient did not die up to the 2-month mark, and that's valuable information, so we don't want to throw that patient out. In addition, we'll have another patient here, okay, who entered the study 3 months ago, enrolled 3 months ago. Okay, we're writing the paper now, but we did the surgery 3 months before. So that patient, we know, survived out to 3 months, but we're not willing to wait longer before something happens. All we know is that patient still, at the 3-month mark, was still alive. We don't know anything after that. And you'll notice that at the beginning of the study, we had 8 patients left, okay? And 4 were censored. 1 lost to follow-up, 1 that enrolled 3 months ago, another one that enrolled 3.5 months ago, and say another patient lost to follow-up, okay? Some censoring events. Now, of course, lost to follow-up and so on, They tend to get lost to follow-up as you get further and further out because, say, this one wasn't really lost to follow-up. This one may have, I mentioned very quickly that this one enrolled 3.5 months ago. This one moved to England. Okay, this patient knew she had pancreatic cancer and wanted to move to be closer to her family. She had children who had moved to England and she wanted to move there too. But because we saw her at this point but never saw her again, and really she was no longer in any communication, we don't know what happened to her, she's also censored. Now at this point, at the end of this interval from 1 to 4 months, there are 4 patients at risk, 1 dies. So the survival at that point is 3 out of 4 patients were still alive for a 75% survival at that interval. So from this point down, we have to have 75% of 80% or 60%. So at that point, we have 60% survival. And this patient right there, 1 died from pancreatic cancer. All right. And then we move out. Now we have 3 patients left. Okay? We're going to have another patient who's censored at this point. 1 patient censored. That patient entered the study 6 months ago. Enrolled 6 months ago. Enrolled 6 months ago. Okay? Only followed for 6 months. And then we go out to 8 months and something else happened. Okay, so at the end here, at the end of 6 months, we have 2 patients left because we started out with 3. We have 1 who was censored. We ended up with 2 patients left. And then 1 patient dies. And then the number of patients at risk is 2, 1 died. So that's an overall survival for that interval, a survival of that interval of 50%. So we go from 60% down to 30%. Okay? And that patient died in a car accident. And you'll say, wait a minute, that's not very fair. It looks like it's impacting survival after surgery. But remember, we've specified that we're going to look at overall survival. So we have to just measure whether patients are alive or dead. And that's overall survival. All we know, and all we know is that it looks like a big effect because at that point, there are only 2 patients at risk and 1 happened to die in a car accident, which is an unlikely event. But there are many possible unlikely events. And if we had a bigger study, this wouldn't have much of an impact, but we have a small study. So at the end of that interval, we have 1 patient left. There's no censoring that goes on. There's 1 patient at the end, no deaths at the end, and so the last patient's there, and we're done. So the overall survival that we have from this study is shown as a Kaplan Meier curve. Okay, thank you very much.